Video game options are not universal, and while developers do attempt to, of course, try to standardize gaming experiences for as many fans as possible, sometimes it actually takes a few tweaks and fiddling around in menus to unlock a title's true potential. With this in mind then, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 gameplay tweaks that seriously improve video games. Number 10, turn on auto loot, Horizon Forbidden West and The Last of Us. While it wouldn't be accurate to describe Horizon or The Last of Us as looter games like Diablo or Borderlands, you can't deny that there is a lot of junk to pick up over the course of these enormous games. Crafting is a core element of each, and therefore so is foraging for materials and scavenging metals and tools and everything else that comes with it. Though a minor inconvenience, it becomes especially exacerbated when, for example, you've stripped a Thunderjaw of all of its individual parts using tear blast arrows, and now you're tracking down every little scrap of metal scattered across a space the size of a football field. Or if you're just out in the world generally, picking up twigs over and over again to craft arrows with later on. Mercifully, both Guerrilla Games and Naughty Dog saw fit to ease the collectathon grind. Included as an accessibility option, it actually makes for a much needed quality of life improvement in both of these games. After turning this option on across Horizon Forbidden West, The Last of Us Part 2, or 2022's The Last of Us Part 1, instead of having to stop and pick up every single item, they'll instead be automatically added to your inventory. Even better, in Horizon's case, the feature works while you're mounted as well, which puts collecting the items you'll be using in bulk almost completely out of mind. No more repeated animations here. Number 9, fix that sluggish aiming. Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 2 divided fans of the first game. The deliberately slower pace sometimes made it feel more like a Wild West sim than an action game. Now, some fans appreciated the change, including yours truly, as it made your choice of activity in the vast open world feel more intentional. However, others felt that it made the game a total chore, and to be fair, that is a completely valid view. Not everyone has time to indulge in these incredibly long animations. However, one thing just about everyone agreed on was that the gunplay was just not quite right in the base version. For a game about gunslinging outlaws, players hardly felt like the fastest gun in the West. Aiming was somehow both slower and imprecise, which is a hard combo to nail. Thank Billy the Kid for tenacious fans though, as it was players who improved this particular issue. By finding the right combo of control adjustments in regard to aiming sensitivity, analog stick dead zones, and aim acceleration, it wasn't too long before a largely agreed upon set of adjustments was spread far and wide across the internet, saving everyone from feeling like they were trying to aim in a treacle.
Before we continue with this fearsome frivolity, I just want to say a huge thanks to THQ Nordic and Destroy All Humans 2 for helping us to make this video. Now, DAH2 is a remake of the classic Destroy All Humans sequel, where you can take control of Crypto as he heads to the 1960s to take revenge on those who destroyed his mothership and his poor old brainy pal. And when I say take revenge, I mean that in the most direct sense, because you will kill, crush, destroy, and call asteroids down on top of all of your enemies, and trust me, it is a hashtag right laugh. I personally enjoyed taking it to those crusty hippies, and in the words of Ringo Starr, warning them with peace and love, and by that I mean burning them to the ground. So yeah, if you want to indulge in that sort of stuff, then pick up the game, because it's available now for PS5, Xbox Series S and X, and PC. And if you like the Doomsday vibes that we're grooving on here, you are gonna absolutely love it.
Number 8, don't level up your skills. Mad Max. Avalanche Studios' 2015 Mad Max game is, of course, criminally underrated. You will know this if you've watched a lot of WhatCulture Gaming. It gave us one of the best, if not the best, car combat systems around, a successful take on Batman Arkham-style combat that was more brutal, and most importantly, an uncanny recreation of the Mad Max world. Every licensed game should take a lesson from what this title did best. Turn your property into a virtual theme park, essentially. That's where the game's real charm came from. The opportunity to exist and play in George Miller's unique post-apocalyptic wasteland. But the game's criticisms were not totally unjustified. I mean, there is a reason why this wasn't a smash hit. It did get fairly repetitive, and some of the open world activities did feel a lot like needless padding. Additionally, the game's mild survival elements, needing to find food and water to heal, ammo being rare and valuable, and scarce resources to upgrade the game's various settlements, did kinda ring hollow under the lens of the game's mostly trivial difficulty. And that's because a fully upgraded Max is simply a behemoth, and non-combat skills only exist to mitigate the survival mechanics elsewhere as well. By simply refusing to level up beyond the first time then, which is mandated during the tutorial, Mad Max becomes the harsh, unforgiving wasteland that it was always meant to be. Number 7, use the touchpad menu shortcuts, Days Gone. Days Gone is famously a game that released to mediocre reviews, but was largely embraced by the public. In addition to the game's much hyped zombie horde set pieces, the introduction of a single vehicle that you have to maintain was refreshing compared to the easily disposed of modes of transportation in most of these games. But there is one feature especially that should have gotten more attention, and that's the old menu shortcuts. Now, these might sound boring on paper, but the way that Days Gone used the often useless DualShock 4 touchpad should have set a standard for games going forward. With a simple swipe in one of the 4 directions, you could pull up the specific menu that you wanted. Gained a skill point, swipe down, spend the point, and then back to the game. Now, saving you a few seconds of tabbing between menus doesn't seem like much, and certainly isn't necessary, but it sure is convenient. It's kind of like the drive-through ordering of video game UI accessibility. Number 6, turn on auto-aim, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. As high quality as the Uncharted series is, it does also present something of a paradox. Largely because of its quality, there is a lot you'd miss out on because you're so focused on what you're actually doing. Put simply, you can't fully appreciate the spectacle of all the combat when you're trying not to die. On the other hand, if you're at all distracted by that spectacle, then your gameplay suffers and you probably will end up dying. Consequently, all of those cool dynamic things that you can do in combat, running and gunning, close quarters combat, swinging from a rope while shooting and then jumping off to deliver a knockout punch to a guy's jaw, require focus and precision. And that's why Uncharted's auto-aim feature is just so perfect. Essentially, it makes the targeting reticule lock onto enemies, meaning that you don't have to pay so much attention to actually aiming. Consequently, you can pull off all of those spectacular stunts and really enjoy the show now that you can focus more on the environment and enemy placement. It basically turns combat into a big puzzle, where the solution is making the most badass gameplay sequence that you possibly can. Number 5, turn hardcore mode on, Fallout New Vegas. When you go through the character customization tutorial of Fallout New Vegas and exit the makeshift hospital that you're in to greet the big bad wasteland waiting for you, you're asked one final question. Do you want to turn on hardcore mode? In one of the game's biggest mistakes, in my opinion anyway, the developers make it clear for this decision that the recommended answer to this question was no. Why is that a mistake? Well, it no doubt turned many gamers off New Vegas's best mode. After all, if the devs don't even recommend a mode that they coded into their game, then why should you take a chance on it? Well, just trust your old pal Josh on this one, because hardcore mode's addition of more, hardcore mechanics and light survival elements increased New Vegas's immersion tenfold. Having to think more smartly about getting enough sleep, water, and food is one thing, but also making doctors as essential as they would be in a post-apocalypse adds another dimension to the game's risk-reward gameplay. If you break your leg while out hunting, well, you better hope you have a doctor's bag on you, or you're going to be limping to a nearby town to get patched up. The regular mode is of course still fun, but for an expanded gameplay experience, it's hardcore mode every time. Number 4, find the classic soundtracks, Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 may have had a troubled development and been a mixed bag upon release, but one thing it absolutely nailed was the feeling of being on a road trip with your friends. The idle conversation, extensive character animation, breaks for gas, and even sightseeing certainly went a long way to making the road trip feel real. But what made it feel authentic were the tunes. Of course, a road trip is made all the better by a good soundtrack, and Final Fantasy 15 provided one of the best around, provided you made a point of visiting every shop along the way. Because along your journey, you'd find a steady stream of classic Final Fantasy soundtracks for sale at the game's various rest stops and gas stations, up to and including orchestral versions and remixes. So for any long-time Final Fantasy fan, being able to listen to all of those songs diegetically in the game, even on a portable MP3 player when on foot, made the journey impossible not to enjoy. Number 3, play on Guerrilla Mode of Far Cry 6. After the glut of Ubisoft open-world titles and a number of dubious entries into the Far Cry series itself, Far Cry 6 finally breathed a little bit of new life into the series. It brought players back to a tropical setting, something fans had been asking for years, and introduced new new elements like tying skills to gear, ditching the upgrade tree, and the suit of Supremo mega weapons that were included in this sequel. Unfortunately, it did majorly lack for difficulty. Even with a slower pace and a less cluttered map, the speed at which you were going through the game still made it feel like every other open-world Ubisoft game, just checking off waypoints on a map. Thankfully, Ubisoft listened and introduced the Guerrilla difficulty. In addition to just making enemies tougher and more observant, it also disables certain HUD elements, limits ammo and resources drastically, and only allows you to tag enemies temporarily. Since tagging has been Far Cry's primary crutch when it comes to stealth gameplay, allowing you to keep track of enemies constantly, this does kind of considerably change the game flow. You suddenly play more carefully, plan more thoroughly, and pay more attention to your surroundings, making for a far more engaging survival experience. Number 2, Selfimposed Permadeath, Prey 2017. Arcane's Prey is one of the best games of its generation. As one of a handful of survivors of an alien attack on a space station, the game hammers that feeling by taking you into its world and then largely leaving you on your own. Of course, there are objectives, but you have a huge amount of freedom in how you want to complete them, in what order, and in how you build your character to accomplish all of these goals. On top of this, there are 2 types of powers that you can invest in Prey, those being the human powers and the alien ones. Now, it is pretty clearly broadcasted early on that becoming too alien is the track to the bad ending, but the aliens do have the coolest powers, so it's kinda hard to resist. Still, it's completely up to you, and the game isn't too challenging either way. Well, that is, unless you give yourself 1 life and 1 life only. With all of your progress in the game at stake, your choices carry a lot more weight. What route do you take to an objective? Is gear protected by a powerful enemy worth the risk? And more importantly, is sacrificing your humanity worth it for survival? Whatever you choose, you'll definitely have a whole new appreciation for the game. Number 1, be a pacifist, Watch Dogs 2. Watch Dogs is a series that never really figured out its thing. All 3 games vary wildly in tone and style, with the first being a gritty story about a tortured murderous vigilante, and the most recent foregoing Acast almost entirely in favor of a rotating door of semi-randomized recruits. But arguably the best and most confused entry in the series is Watch Dogs 2. As protagonist Marcus Holloway, you and your crew of young millennial hacktivists combat the always troublesome Bloom Corporation. In a complete departure from the original, Marcus and friends are a light-hearted but principled group of progressive hackers and artists, which makes it especially weird then when you strap yourself with an assault rifle and start killing people in the streets like you're playing GTA in real life. This is exactly why it makes so much sense to, well, decide not to do just that when you're actually playing the game. By playing non-lethally, not only do you maintain the tone of the story, but also make yourself a more interesting game to play. There are some fights that you can't avoid, but you'll find yourself relying a lot more on creative use of your hacking abilities to avoid conflict altogether, which some would argue should have been the whole point of the game in the first place. Seriously, you take the guns out of this sequel and it just gets so much better. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think about these gameplay tweaks? And are there any hidden gems that you always turn on that I missed off here? Let me know, and while you're down there, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.